Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 from the Unification Party headquarters. Here we are again with Adrian and
Hello.
talking. Hey, and this week or this episode, anyways, I thought it was interesting this last week when the biggest complaint of most Canadians is Donald Trump's referring to us as a 51st state. And now we're all super patriotic, and nothing is more important to your average Canadian than their sovereignty. And then I thought it was interesting that Mark Carney, as his first move as PM, instead of, I guess you can look at it two ways. It's a good power move that he went to Europe, but with his going to Europe and now that he's come back, we realize not much necessarily was accomplished, but at least it started the dialogue of should Canada do more sort of trade or invest more? There's even, there's probably two guys out there with the podcast that are the Unification Party and they want Canada to join the European Union. So if we find out about those guys, we'll have them on. But anyways, it started the talk of, what are the benefits of more trade with the EU versus the United States. So I did a little bit of investigation into, again, of course, I'm going to preface this all by saying 100% Canada should attempt with all its effort to increase its trade with Europe, Central Asia, the Southeast Asia, China, like anywhere that they'll take our stuff for sure. We should be looking to do that. But if you had to choose as a country to protect your sovereignty from the States by giving your sovereignty to Europe, I would like to do like a side-by-side comparison of what that kind of looked like. So what I thought was interesting is that the USA has a $26 trillion economy. Europe has a just under 20 million trillion economy. There's 100 million more people in the EU, but it's essentially, if you wanted to call it as comparison, it's this 27 countries or 27 states versus the 50 states and territories in the United States. So from an economy perspective and all the things that you can actually measure, America's doing way better. And even when you ask AI and a couple of podcasts and this and that to try to get to the bottom of it, they all had Europe's long-term economic prognosis is poor, and America's immediate and intermediate and long-term forecast seems to be high or higher anyways. But I mean, no major shockers there that United States is, I mean, we already are, again, like interconnected with our infrastructure already. Like we're already in place to just continue to do business in a significant way with the more superior economic partner and the larger economic partner. But again, I get the idea of doing trade. But what I did think was interesting is I did a comparison of the top 10 European countries versus the top 10 states. And like Germany, 4.7 trillion is California, which is 4.13 trillion. And then you have France is 3.2 trillion. Texas is 2.7 trillion. Then Spain is 1.7 trillion. New York is 2.3 trillion. And then you got like the Netherlands is their number 5 is the Netherlands at 1.2 trillion. But when you go into the States, you get down to like Pennsylvania at number 6 is around the same economy. And then I was thinking, imagine you've got your small business, Adrian, and Mary, she works up front, and you're going to expand your business, and Mary does all the incoming calls, and now you're going to expand into not California, Texas, New York, Florida, or Illinois. But Mary's now got to field calls from Gunter in Germany, make invoices for Pierre in France, and try to get,
Frederick in Dusseldorf. Don't forget about
yeah,
him. And
yeah. And the list
Juan
goes on
in
and on.
Barcelona. Yeah, no, and then all the different. Even though it's the EU, I'm sure there's different package. Maybe I'm not. Maybe there isn't different packaging rules, but I would bet there'll be little nuances that yeah, it'll just make it a lot harder.
For sure.
Yeah, that's just the
Absolutely. I
phone.
mean,
That's
there's
just
going
the
to be,
phone side for poor Mary. I'll deal
right,
with the
right.
rest. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I'm sure there's even like in defense in the probably from state to state there's nuances and things, but I would
Yeah,
say that to the degree that you'd be dealing with in Europe would be insane.
minute. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I just and then I
Even
mean
just
going
marketing. Just you could make the same commercial in Pennsylvania you
absolutely
could use in Texas. You know what I mean? But
yes.
maybe not in Barcelona and Berlin.
Yeah, not only do you have like I mean you could argue now somebody'd say, oh well you have translators, this, that, and whatever at your
Yeah.
fingertips, but you don't have the cultural nuance to be effective in marketing to know
It's,
that like
at the end of
yeah,
the day,
how,
it's an added roadblock that is otherwise not there. When it comes to the free market, that's a roadblock nobody wants.
I would say in and of itself, it's an insurmountable roadblock for for your any small to medium sized
For sure.
business,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So I thought, and then don't get started on they've got like 360 billion a year in defense spending, and America has 860 billion a year. Like from a military perspective, 2.5 times the states is 2.5 times more committed to if push comes to shove, defending a Canada than Europe with its declining economy, declining militaries. I mean, now mind you, I did find out they're doing a big push over 4 years, or they're proposing this $860 billion called rearm. But
Yeah, it was my joke
it,
about the Germans buying tanks last week. I wasn't
yeah,
joking.
yeah.
Like Germany's rearming. That's great, right?
Yeah, yeah, apparently, but this is across the board, across all of Europe. So
Yeah, no,
they,
I know, but they're looking since Germany's the economic powerhouse, they're kind of forgetting about like no, obviously bygones be bygones, but to some extent, you know,
sure,
it's just not a good omen.
yeah, not a good omen. I also saw something interesting in relation to like, okay, so decide, okay, we've decided we're going to put the majority of our eggs in a European basket. I was listening to this program and they were talking about the energy grid. It has no link east to west. So there's basically three or four grid blocks and they don't connect with each other east to west. So there's like BC going north and south, Alberta, Saskatchewan going north and south, then the east going north and south, not connecting to each other east and west. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, so, okay, so even if we wanted to like decouple, like we would have to, recouple our whole grid and to separate. I thought that's only one of the issues. The second issue is apparently these grids, they work in conjunction with each other and they maintain, I didn't understand the science of it. These guys are pretty technical, but the essence of it is the grid has to power up and down in unison as power is pulled off in different parts of it. There's like an equalization effect. And so it's like impossible. I'll put it in the simplest terms. Doug Ford, let's say he says like he wanted to like turn the power off. He can't be done without the cooperation of the grid on the other side. If they were to do something like just on their own, the cascading effects of the collapse of the transformers blowing in every direction or something would be like cataclysmic. So just the idea that we could even attempt to disengage, it just becomes more and more apparent that there's like it's gone beyond that. Like there's, let's say, new world order, let's say everyone's worst case scenarios are realized, that's tyranny from the south. There's not really much in our tool bag that we can, I'm sure that's not true entirely, but at least with regards to this like energy, the codependency is It's
built in. It's built into the
it's
cake.
built in. Yeah,
Then you look at
it's
the
built in.
pipelines and the oil and everything, and yeah, it's the same.
I
And
asked, I asked Perplexity to estimate what it would cost to disentangle the infrastructure. It refused because it was like there's too many factors, of course. But pushed to it, it was in push to estimate. It was in the trillions of dollars.
for a
So
non-problem, like a problem that isn't there.
yeah, a problem that's not there yet.
Yeah,
So
I bet even so, like that's not that's any yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you're right. I just think even if the problem's there, like there'll be so many other problems there that there wouldn't be capital for that. And
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
obviously it's
exactly.
so capital intensive, they would have maybe built the grid differently, because you would think like just as a layman, if there was a way to like have the excess power from BC power Manitoba in like in a matter of emergency or whatever, why not? Well, obviously there's a reason why not. Like there's a reason that that's not a thing and it's set up differently. So, but I did think it was interesting too, like just seeing the mention the pipelines, like how like that Energy East, like it just makes I don't understand. I don't actually. That's an issue. Maybe I should look into more because I just don't understand the Quebec side of it at all. Where like they're the ones who basically, since they are against it, it's like okay, well now we're subject to the Americans because everything goes south and then comes back. So unless you want, if you want to get on your high horse, you should have let us build that pipeline at least.
Yeah, I guess smarter people than us have figured.
Sorry to
I
interrupt your point, Jay, but just to
No, no,
add
I'm
to
not
add
making.
to
I'm
me.
not. I'm. You're enhancing my point. It's the same thing as the auto industry. They're like, that's the big
Mhm.
complaint with these tariffs. How do they keep track going back and forth? Because they've become so interdependent that it's impossible to disentangle. But or that's what they tell us on the news. That's they can't keep. There's no way to accurately do that. But
Yeah, what coming from the auto industry, like I don't know how they're gonna not deal with like the runs being on hold for 4 months. Like, oh no, it's not like we're in a recession where people are chomping at the bit to buy new $100,000 trucks. Anyways, like they could close the lines down and retool down south, and if anything, it would definitely probably save the money in the long run if Trump's doing the
yeah,
tariffs, like for
well,
sure.
which we seem to understand that at least on some of those select industries is a sure thing, as we discussed last week.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I was just trying to practically like give it the best consideration for like the EU, but I can't get past the
It's
how
ridiculous.
difficult, yeah, how difficult it would be.
Well, even just from like a sheer optics perspective, like our one like leg into that maybe even being an idea would be our relationship to the Crown of England and the UK, being as the King of England is our boss, being the Governor General representing them. They left the EU like years ago, so like
Yeah, I'm not even getting into that. Like I did listen to one guy who was making like he was talking about it all from a legal perspective and that how in the EU, a European nation isn't clearly defined as being a nation that strictly is in Europe. Like he went, I didn't bother going
okay.
down the road of the legal aspect of it. And then they were saying that there was even a free trade agreement they've been trying to put in place for quite a time now. But apparently, things like if Canada was to join the EU, you'd have to have unanimous um, acceptance, all 27 countries. That's one of the things that's holding up this free trade agreement because all you have to have is, Spanish cow farmers with enough, you know, political clout to get, the Spanish whoever to say nope to Canada's. Apparently there's a block of 10 countries in the EU that are they're pushing back against Canada's the free trade agreement being put in place. So let alone the legal ramifications of it joining as a
So to
full country.
clarify, that's a free trade agreement with us, not amongst the EU. That's just
No, a
Canada.
free that's already he was discussing. There's already this is in place. Like he had in his list of like it's already part of NATO. It's already part of certain trading blocks. There's already been an attempt to negotiate or has been negotiated a free trade agreement between Canada and the European Union, but it's stalled up at various times because of these you know, this one block of 10 countries this last time around or whatever. So he was saying more or less using it as a cautionary tale from, but again, his whole perspective was examining the legal side of Canada joining the European Union, like legally,
Fun
like and
thought.
what that would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting what I learned about this free trade agreement, and it was interesting his perspective on this. Like you discussed, if for Alberta to secede, there's policies and procedures in place. I think it was 50% of the votes, and states and or all the provinces had to whatever the rules were. There's rules to these things, but I'm not even talking about that. Just that, like we said, simplest terms. Mary in the front office now has to speak 15 languages fluently for you to get the same amount of trade as you can get by throwing something on a truck and sending it over to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there's a million factors at play. Exactly, right? On the great
Yeah,
highway
but
system
we
here
don't
in
even
North
have to go
America.
that deep, go that deep into it. Just that alone, what I just said there, that alone, it just makes it an impractical solution. I suppose for the big players, it's great. Like, I mean, there's no need. You don't need to worry about language restrictions if you're like selling nickel and cobalt and our resources and raw materials because the
Well,
middlemen will concern themselves with all those problems.
well, and the big players too typically have the workforce that's like, we already got a guy from Zambia, like he can answer
Yeah,
the phone.
exactly.
Now we get to give him more work. Like they already have their hands in it. Like they're loving it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So the
sure.
big guys would probably benefit. The resource provider, the whoever buys bulk lumber or whoever, the big players. But your average Canadian is not going to benefit from any kind of European Union
Yeah, and that
unification.
did you see anything regarding like the military aspect of that? Like you remember, like I've been complaining a few times on our show about buying those subs from England. Like it doesn't seem like we buy too much from America. Did you figure out is any as to why we're like have this allegiance to buy the English scrap and add it to our
I
fleet?
don't know. I didn't even bother with that. I I've just assumed that that's what we do. We get old junky equipment from as long as I can remember, and
You're like a little
our
brother of the
poor,
poor family.
yeah,
Like
the hand-me-downs, right? Ill-fitting
yeah,
pants and yeah,
ugly old chips.
yeah,
Yeah.
shirt with a permanent gravy stain, basically. But I guess I never really took, like, in all seriousness, I never really took Canada's like military, like, I've never really felt in my life that we were under any real credible threat of there actually being some sort of, as much as we love the movie Red Dawn, it wasn't going to be Russians falling from the sky, paratrooping from the sky, taking us in the streets in
Well, I
Canada.
think that's because, like, at least what I felt, which is I feel like the reality, because that's how I have to feel. But it's like if we were ever at war with, say, Red China or whatever the Hollywood motion term would be, it's like that would be a real dark day for a lot of people. Like, oh my, like the Germans wouldn't be happy to see, that, and like the Americans, obviously that would be a harbinger of way worse things going on as well. It wouldn't just be like, oh, Canada's all of a sudden getting picked on by China and nobody cares. Like,
Well,
like we're getting picked on
well,
economically now and nobody cares. But like
absolutely.
militarily is different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that may come to be an issue in the future. I mean, Trump's making people pay their way. And they were saying that America, it spends 3.5% of its GDP on its military funding. And Europe was around 1.7, pushing towards 2%. They're trying to get up closer to 3%. And I guess Poland is the only one who's like taking it up a notch or two. And Poland's like over 3% of their GDP is spent on military.
Yeah, Poland's also shooting people on the border who cross it illegally. Like, Poland is in a league of their own when it comes to Europe.
Well, yeah, they're taking that thing seriously. So I don't know. It seems quite simple that I mean, not that we've come to this incredible ooze. Oh wow, we should leave the states and go there. And I don't mean that, but it was just to get some of the numbers behind it and see what's happening in that sort of part in that realm is kind of interesting. Whether or not we're going to, forge ahead with more economic ties that way or foster the ones we already have here closer to home. But
Yeah,
Carney will probably want to take us down the road to Europe because we're
we're
basically
the most
Europeans.
non-European European nation, I think, is what he said.
Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. So
Yeah.
you carry on.
Well, I would have to agree that, like, I mean, it is like whatever that statement. Like, I mean, thinking about it, if Russia's European, then yeah, okay, we're probably the most non-European European nation. I think technically, no, Turkey's not European. That's the border right there, the Anatolia Peninsula. Is
Well, Turkey
Constantinople?
they used to call it the sick man of Europe. So I think it's technically is
Well,
in
the Ottoman
Europe.
Empire was the sick man of Europe, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that wasn't it going down into there? Isn't that where we're?
Yeah, that's what's left of it is Turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just for clarity's sake. Okay, so yeah, Turkey is, but yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I was a little disappointed. I was actually with his results in Europe. Like, I mean, I didn't expect it to be as a nothing burger as I thought it might be. Like, I hypothecated that it might be like that Zelensky moment after the fight in the White House, runs back to the Europeans, and then 2 days later he's like super apologetic to the White House, and like he goes to the Europeans for comfort, and they kind of tell him like, you better make a deal with that guy. It kind of seemed like Carney got a bit of that treatment. Like, I mean, he met with the king, which was nice, but like, I don't know if you saw in France, but when he landed, the deputy of the National Assembly met him, and like some guy holding an umbrella. Like, it wasn't like a very dignified ceremony, or I wouldn't even call it a ceremony. It almost looked like just like a glorified Uber. Like, it wasn't much of a,
Diplomatic Uber.
yeah, it was a guy with a title, but like, and but like, and as well, I don't know if you heard, but like even when he was in England, he met with Keir Starmer, but like Starmer didn't want to do like a national, like a joint press conference together or anything like that. Like when they met, they were in front of the cameras, but they weren't taking any questions, and like that was it because Starmer's
So
trying to.
he had some good photo ops basically. That's about it.
He got that was it, and then he got out of there, went to Callaway, I believe, but yeah, it was super uneventful. I know he did say something. There was something he did say regarding the carbon price for trade in the future. He called it like diversified trade, and was talking about how Europe's going to have a price for carbon, Asia's going to have a price for carbon. He was talking like a globalist banker, not like the prime minister of a sovereign nation. But that kind of like kind of for me kind of felt like foreshadowing because like he obviously isn't just saying words like me and you here on a podcast. He's fucking he's saying words that he's heard from other people who are on board with those words, and you know that's what his like history shows. It's all about that. He was the one who basically worked on that for the UN, for the WWF, for Canada, for like all that stuff to try and put a price on carbon and like try and create a new market for it. And I think plain and simply, I think the Europe trip was a disaster. Would you agree or disagree with that brash statement?
Well,
Maybe a letdown.
I'm
Maybe
not gonna
disaster a little hard.
disagree. I'm not gonna disagree. I know last week we were very hopeful that he would go and rock it. Like we gave him the benefit of the doubt. Best for Canada would be that he's did some killer deal things. But it looks like he had some photo ops. I did hear some people argue in favor of why he's wise to avoid the States. It can only make him look bad, whereas Europe made at least like it cements him in your mind that he's the head of the country because he was on, sharing a stage with similar heads of countries. So, as a
Yeah, he gets the
like, and
optics.
He
of a
gets the
station.
optics, yeah,
Yeah,
of that. So before he goes into the election, and I know,
the real
I
stuff,
guess
the
there's,
hard stuff.
yeah, and I guess they're saying that they're
Sunday.
calling the election Sunday, but I don't
That's what
know.
I've been hearing today too. Yeah. And I will say the little bit of press I've seen from him well there and since, none of it seems to be doing him any favors. Like the man loves to put his foot in his mouth. Like he's handling this conflict of interest thing very shadily. And I think like the little bits of Canadians that get to see it, I think the more Mark Carney they get to see, the better for the Conservatives. And that might be why they're calling the election so soon. Because I mean, he's not like personally, I have a little bit, I'm not a very wealthy person by any stretch of the imagination. But if I was elected to some sort of office, I can immediately tell you like what if where what I have. And like you could all come to your own conclusions on how I could stand to gain from those possessions and what maybe I would want. You know what I mean? Like the house there or holding stock in this company there. It's not that hard. You know what I mean? And I could see it being a little bit harder if you're a central banking billionaire who's done a lot, you know, but at the end of the day, it seems to be something that's very hard for him. He's very clear that he's following the rules. And and even he snapped back at Rosemary Barton the other day and the gal from Globe and Mail who by most reporters and commentators' perspective are soft, friendly media to the Carney liberals. And it's like, if you can't handle that, how are you going to handle Pierre? How are you going to handle
Yeah,
Trump? Like,
yeah,
and did you see? Obviously, you saw it, but I'm going to maybe you didn't. Did you see Trump's comments on who he would rather run
yeah, of
against?
course, yeah,
Which
yeah,
is which I loved from the perspective of liking Trump and liking Pierre and like hating the fact that Trump is maybe going to get the liberals elected for a fifth time just because TV say Trump bad and
yeah,
everybody's up in a tizzy on the Trump derangement syndrome. So hopefully that kind of screws with it, combined with his poor performance, even around friendly media. Like he hasn't been good to media. Like he's very strict with his media, and like I said, he's fumbling softballs. It seems to me. So I'm
yeah.
stoked
I
for the
don't.
election if
Well,
that's
I did
actually
see. Yeah, I mean, if did you see what the dates were? There was apparently where there's like two dates, like April 28th and like May 5th or something like that.
yeah. Prime
So it'd
Minister
be
can
like
dictate
five,
the
six
length.
weeks. Yeah,
I think he's going to go with the shorter one. Just call me crazy, because again,
yeah.
like from what we've seen, he's acting like a man who's got something to hide, and like quite frankly, it shows. Like he looks like the cat who ate the canary every time he goes up. Like it's just like, what are you hiding, bud? Like how hard is it to say like Paul Martin owned the third largest shipping company. We raked him over the coals and busted his chops in the media, but like he got through it. He's like, we all knew where he stood. He wanted stuff shipped. Like, ooh, and we got over it. Like, and even there, I heard today there was during Harper, there was one of his ministers who like had serious interests in, I think it was like the oil industry. And whenever talks on that would come up, Buddy would just abdicate and like step out of the room. And like, yeah, like I'm not voting on this. And like, I don't need to be here to discuss policy on it. Which is just like, that's how you handle a conflict of interest. Like, you just own up. Like, it's not wrong. I don't know, Jay. I know it seems like that's maybe like the honorable thing to do. And maybe we're all getting old and cynical. So it seems like honor's lacking. But I don't know what he's hiding. Like, clearly it must be something if he just doesn't want to say it. Like, he's making it something. Even if it's nothing, it's now something by the way he's handling it. And the only thing he's got going for him is Trump bad. So he better
It might
just,
be enough though.
it very well might be. But I was also kind of thinking about how, well, okay, here's a fun one for you. Another fun stat I saw. First off, a lot of the pollsters are being accused, not credibly, but whatever. They're being accused of overpolling liberals and maybe not being too stringent with their questioning to narrow out where they're talking to people. So they're, because some of the most trusted pollsters out there, I think it's Abacus, like they still have conservatives ahead by 4. Might be Axios. Don't quote me on the exact polling firm or whatever. But the polling is mad. But here's one fun stat: 66% of C voters actually plan to vote no matter what, whereas only 49% of liberal voters plan to vote no matter what. So there is still on a national level a little bit more like people on our side of the aisle, so to say, sick and tired of the liberals, new coding of Carney or not, like we see through it. But it does look like like the liberals are gaining traction from the NDP. The NDP haven't ever really looked this bad federally, and they're also gaining some support from conservative women. Conservative men don't seem to have moved at all, but some of the conservative women seem to think Carney would be better to deal with Trump. That's what the talk of the town seems to be in Canadian politics on that subject as of the last week. So I just think the more conservative women and liberal women who like see Carney, they're either going to stay home or vote for Pierre, because Carney, like I said, if you can't handle like Rosemary Barton and the Globe and Mail just asking you some cordial questions, I don't know how you're going to handle real questions. Like as they progress, especially with Trump, things are changing every 6 hours with that guy. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to be prepared and polished for like everything that's coming your way, like a typical political cycle maybe would afford you. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. Like I do, and I'm also a little perturbed that nobody other than like the odd conservative commentators talking about these Chinese tariffs that just went in effect on canola, like going up 100%, which just beats up Saskatchewan. And that leads me to believe, because also people talk about Carney's connection to China. So I don't know. I don't want to go too far down the conspiracy rabbit hole. I'll leave it at that. But I think things are looking better for Pierre than they were last time we talked, on a positive note. And I think they're looking worse for Carney. Couple things I've seen from Pierre that I liked. He's talking about shovel-ready zones, like getting like apparently it takes 17 years to get the permitting in place for a mine in Canada, which I'm not even shocked to hear that. But like apparently there's lots of places in this country that they've had the permitting in place on provincial levels and so forth and so on for 15 years, 12 years, and they're waiting on a couple things, or the federal government changed a couple rules. So another program Pierre talked about this week that I liked was apprenticeship programs in high schools. So like, and I was saying that for time, because there's guys I went to high school with that I knew. I always used to say, like, if so and so could have just gone into a carpentry apprentice in grade 10, they wouldn't have dropped out. And maybe we could have taught him some like math and a little bit of English, but with like a carpentry lens, and like he would have actually learned it. Like I know it's silly, like yeah, we need everybody to learn biology and this. It's like, well, they're just dropping out. So there's got to be a better way. And anyways, that's just me going off about something that bugged me as a younger man, that I think there could have been reform in the education. But it's nice to see Pierre's doing that to try and bridge the gap between the private sector and the high schools. Because I've been to high school in years, but I recall even when I was there, the universities did a fantastic job advertising to you. You knew who they were. You knew where they were. But like as far as trades and stuff like that, unless you were searching for it, like there was kids that did and found them, but like they weren't like they didn't have as fair of a shake, so to say. But so
Well, almost the opposite. You were
shame.
discouraged. Discouraged, yeah. That was something that you would fail to.
So I'm pretty happy with Pierre, what he's done, like that, those policies there. He's really getting out in front of the media, talking about jobs and talking about canceling the, like, again, also too, calling Carney out on just like his deceit and his like lies and like lack of answering questions. Like, I'm going to cancel the whole carbon tax because whatever we all saw last week wasn't a thing, let alone it was just consumer. So like that's messaging, I think, is least divisive. Like we joked about abortions and Uzis, he didn't go that route, thank God. And he went the very practical route of jobs and just like talking to more like, so to say, kitchen table issues.
I could also see, like, I know even in the polls, put aside that they're possibly, weighted and whatever those concerns you brought up. I could also see, just because, like, whether you like Nickelback or not, it came to a point that like it became trendy to say you hate Nickelback, right? So just like it's trendy to hate Trump out loud and in public, you've got to roll your eyes at Trump and whatever. But when you're in the privacy of the ballot box, nobody knows, what box you ticked. And I think there's probably a lot of dudes out there with, quiet guys who go to work and pay the taxes and whose wives talk all day long about scary Trump and then by extension scary Pierre.
Mhm.
And then you know, Tom goes into the box, kisses his wife, promises her that he's voting, for Carney.
We got this. Carney, future together, babe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then he does what he does. He does what he got to do. So I can see that across the board. And I don't mean just from a male's perspective, just a lot of people. If you were to do a street interview, everybody is going to talk tough against Trump in a street interview. 9 out of 10 people, maybe downtown here, but in truth, it might
Well,
be closer to 5 out of 5 or something.
well, there's that old quote from the reporter who talked about the Nixon campaign. Like I never met anybody who voted for Nixon, but like somehow he won like all the battleground states. And da 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 da. I was like, yeah, it's just because like when you make things something unpopular, like it's not an issue that's going to poll well. Like I was even thinking during the Trump election, conservatives by their very nature are conservative. I don't want to talk to you. Who are you? Why are you calling me? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love Trudeau. Click, like whatever. You know what I mean? Like, whereas I don't know, it just seemed that's a big factor. As well, there's also like just a side issue here, but like it seems like violent crime is on the rise. So I mean, like, if I was living,
There seems to be people are talking about that for sure.
yeah, like in like nice cities like Oakville, Ontario, a city I lived in as a child, that was like one of the like I know Doug when I lived there, Doug Gilmore and Donovan Bailey didn't live that far away. We were in the government complex, but they were in the like Oakville, beautiful, even like minus
Yeah,
that
yeah.
complex I lived in, which wasn't even that bad. And yeah, so to hear Oakville people talking about it, like those aren't Pierre people on average. I mean, they are like people in Oakville work, but I mean that would be a liberal riding for sure. Definitely one they'd want to target, and so I'm sure that like other ridings in that vein are talking about it as well. Like you can't. I did see a stat, but I didn't look too much into it, where it was like the violent crime rise compared to the U.S. and it was so glaringly worse in Canada in the last few years that I almost just kind of disregarded it. I was like, if this is real, I'll see this again because it was just. But I
Yeah,
you
I
do
think
hear
I saw something to the same effect, and I I was skeptical, but
it was
maybe
too
it's
good to be
true.
true. It was too good to be
Yeah.
true. The one I saw, but I have heard a lot of violent crime. Like even in the town I just left in Ontario, I hear crime. Like I hear my buddy had a drive-by shooting 6 doors down, which is like I remember 20 years ago we'd spend summers trying to find the homeless guy because like we'd go in the forest and we'd explore the town and there would be no homeless people, let alone now there's drive-by shootings, there's drug dens and all that, and that's everywhere. It's not just the one little town. So I mean, you can hate Pierre and hate Trump all you want, but you still got to walk outside sometime. And I don't know, I think they're losing more people than they're gaining. Maybe they had that bump. They had the bump with Trudeau leaving and Trump coming in. That's the perfect storm for the Liberals. That was their high watermark. I want to say, and like especially after I've seen what Carney in the last week, it's just like he's definitely not the guy I saw talking to Avi Yemeni at the WEF in Davos 2 years ago on the street. He looked like a slick guy there. He looked like a devil in a seersucker, and now he just looks like the boss who doesn't want to answer questions, which is just like, yeah, must be nice, buddy. I did do a comparison though. Speaking of kitchen tables issues of prices across the border, some things were shocking. Like not really in a great way, but like the one thing that really shocked me, like was like sugar and Pepsi were almost like half price in Canada versus the
Really?
American side. Yeah, so like yeah, like basically a 4 kilogram bag of sugar. Now it wasn't the exact measurement like that they use there, but it was give or take the same. 297 in Canada. In Canadian money in the States, it worked out to be 448. So about $1.50 more. That's about 50% more. But 2 liter Pepsi in Canada was 267 and 411 over there. Switched to Canadian money, which kind of shocked me. I didn't think that. I didn't think, and obviously gas in Canada 155 a liter, worked out to be in America about $1.14 Canadian a liter. So still cheaper gas over there. A lot of things were pretty close. Like chicken, I did thighs per pound was about $4 per pound in Canada, about $5 a pound, $4.94 in America. Milk, I did the 2 liter jug, $4.81 in Canada, $3.18 in America. So apples to apples, these are all in Canadian dollars. Butter, your typical, brick of butter, $5.98 in Canada, $5.66 in America. So that one's pretty much the same. Now this one kind of shocked me too. Is Kraft Dinner is $2.67. It's a Canadian product. It's $2.67 in Canada, and it's $1.77 in the States converted over. And if you got the Walmart stuff, it was even cheaper. Anyways, I did the Pepsi, I did the sugar. Eggs, we smashed the Americans on eggs. $5.67 for a dozen large browns, $7.40 for a dozen large brown American eggs. A pound of ground beef and pork mixed in Canada is $5. And by the way, I did Walmart in America across the border from me, and then I compared it to the local Walmart in your city. And ground beef with pork in Canada is $6, $5.97, and in the States $4.24. So it evens out. I mean, the gas is pretty sweet, and I mean, if you like your junk food, come to Canada, which kind of shocked me. I thought we were the healthier country. So, but yeah, like I was telling you earlier, the border was a lot quieter. It was a ghost town. So it does seem like a bit of a change of the vibe over there for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if that's across the board or how long that will last.
I'm going to go fill the truck up this week, and that'll be a 10-minute there and back. We'll see if I get searched like I did when I was there on Tuesday having to bring the goat food back. So,
Yeah, that is interesting. So I guess over the next 5 weeks, 5, 6 weeks, whatever it will be, if this election takes place, we'll have lots to speak about.
yeah, for sure. I mean, much like this last time, there's something every day. Like the election got called, like this morning, that was the talk. I think it must have come out late last night. And then I think, yeah, there's always something. There's always something, Jay.
Did you hear about the Premier Smith or Danielle out of Alberta? She made some declaration. I think it was either yesterday or earlier today, and Carney, I guess, has demanded to see her. Did you hear anything about that?
I heard something along the lines that she's trying to give Alberta a little bit more power over its resources than Ottawa. And I would assume Ottawa is probably not like a big fan of that. That's what I
Yeah.
heard. I did hear something, but to say any more than that would be a disservice to our 5 viewers. So,
Yeah, that would be a disservice to them. Well,
but
I'm going to find out more about that definitely for next time, because it seemed I did see a quick document, something along the lines where talking about exactly like you're saying, more say in how they get to run the show here, which some people could interpret as the beginning steps of negotiating their own way out of Canada into the United States. I mean, a lot of these things may just happen.
on a fun side note, I did hear a fella. Have you ever heard of anybody mention the? I think it's the Free California movement or the North California movement. It's basically a movement where, like, I assume, like, part of California wants to separate from like Sacramento and LA and San Francisco. Because obviously, I think we both heard of the Greater Idaho movement or whatever. The Washington,
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Idaho. That one's mainstream, but I just heard tell of this Greater California one, and the fellow was talking something about like he's got connections with the Alberta movement or whatever, and I thought that was interesting because like it does kind of seem to be like you've even mentioned before about like how city states might be the future, and if like these movements keep happening where the rural parts just leave the big city, it might just be like, hey, if we see the success, if we see the success of it, might be the way of the future, and it might be a good way. Like personally, I've kind of thought of it like, wouldn't it be cool if like all the communists in America could just come to Canada, and all the hardworking Canadians could just go to the States, and we could just have like a conservative country and a communist country, and like we can all just, you guys can burn your country down, and we'll just go work, or, but like maybe the city state might be a compromise of like, oh, we don't have to move that far. Well, you guys can destroy the cities. We'll just go to work out here in the country and sell you food. So, anyways, who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, that there's a lot of fingers pointing to that reality as being the future, where I know there's big talk of globalization, and that seems to be the push, and where everybody's always worried about this sort of one world government and a new world order, but it seems like all indications are pointing towards, I don't mean collapse in the sense that everything falls apart and doesn't work anymore, but
Change.
balkanization. Yeah, balkanization, back to, like I said, city states, vast rural areas, cities doing this, cities doing that. That's probably the future, but probably, it'll probably just, trundle along all nicely as is, for now. I'm not too worried about any of this happening tomorrow.
Me neither.
But all right, well, let's wrap this up, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. Talk to you later, Jay.
Bye.
Wow!